Elara Vance always felt like a misfit in the grand tapestry of the world. Not in a tragic or melancholic way, but simply because she realized that her passions rarely resonated with those of her peers. While others immersed themselves in social media, parties, or blockbuster movies, Elara found ultimate joy spending hours in front of her computer screen, dissecting the complex algorithms of classic strategy games, or diving into intricate logic puzzles that would stump even seasoned programmers. She was a second-year psychology student at an ordinary university on the city's outskirts, where knowledge of the human mind was taught dryly from thick textbooks. Elara didn't dislike her major, on the contrary. She was fascinated by the hidden mysteries within each person, the subtle motivations driving behavior and emotion. But that fascination truly ignited when she applied it to simulated scenarios, where intellect and deductive reasoning were the only weapons. She often likened her strategy games to miniature psychological laboratories, where she could test tactics, predict opponent behavior, and discover loopholes in thought systems. Elara's life unfolded in a tranquil routine: lectures, library, her favorite small cafe, and her dorm room cluttered with books and her computer. Her dreams weren't lofty, like becoming a space scientist or a prominent politician. She simply wanted to do something meaningful, something intellectually challenging, something that allowed her to delve into the unsolved mysteries of the mind. She often wondered if there was a place in this world, or beyond, where her talents could truly be maximized. And then, a fateful day arrived. Without warning, without preparation. It was an ordinary Wednesday afternoon, and Elara was buried in an essay on the impact of cultural bias in nonverbal communication, when a blinding light suddenly enveloped her room. It wasn't the warm glow of the sun or artificial lighting, but a cold, sterile luminescence that felt as if space and time were distorting. Her room, usually cramped and messy, seemed to melt into another reality. As the light subsided, Elara found herself no longer in her familiar room. She stood on a softly glowing circular platform, surrounded by a vast, boundless space filled with ethereal blue light and massive metallic structures suspended in midair. Before her stood three towering figures, unlike any creature she had ever seen in books or films. One was slender and graceful, covered in a shimmering, translucent crystalline material. Another was more colossal, with skin like stone and sharp, angular features. The third, slightly shorter, possessed a fluid, flowing appearance like a stream of energy. One of them, the crystalline figure, spoke. Its voice echoed, seeming to emanate not from a fixed point but from all around the space. Yet, strangely, it was translated directly into Elara's mind, bypassing her ears. Human. Elara Vance, welcome to the antechamber of the Interstellar Council. Elara, with a psychologist's instinct, tried to remain calm, though her heart pounded like a drum. She observed, she analyzed. They weren't like creatures from horror movies. They exuded an aura of majesty, ancientness, and, above all, absolute confidence, almost arrogance. The Interstellar Council, the crystalline figure continued, has observed the development of civilizations across the Milky Way for millennia. We are the custodians of order, knowledge, and progress. Recently, we made a crucial decision concerning your planet, Earth. The coldness in the voice sent a shiver down Elara's spine. Earth? They had been watching Earth? This went far beyond any science fiction hypothesis she had ever read. We noted your species' technological development is primitive. The stony figure spoke, its voice deep like an earthquake. And while there are some surprising potentials in other areas, technological backwardness often accompanies certain limitations in logical thought and adaptability to complex galactic societal structures. Elara felt a flush of heat rise to her face. Primitive? Limitations? She wanted to yell in protest, but instinct told her to remain silent and listen. The energy-like figure, with a softer but still authoritative voice, interjected. Following a recent event involving the decoding of an ancient signal that Earth inadvertently received, we established a special committee. As a result, we believe that education and integration are the best ways to bring humanity into the galactic community in an orderly manner. Elara remembered, a few months ago, there had been news of an astronomical observatory on Earth that had picked up an extremely complex radio signal from outer space. Earth scientists had been completely stumped, unable to decipher even a small part of it. She had read about it and thought it was just a hoax or some natural phenomenon. It turned out, it was a test, and humanity had failed. We have developed a specialized protocol for locating latent intelligence within nascent civilizations. The crystalline figure explained, and you, Elara Vance, are one of the few individuals on your planet who met the criteria. Though somewhat unexpectedly for us. Unexpectedly? The way they spoke, as if a human being intelligent was a strange anomaly. Elara felt both indignant and curious. Therefore, the stony figure concluded, we have decided to send you to the Xy'lar Academy, the galaxy's foremost educational institution for tactics and psychological warfare. You will be the first human student. This is an unprecedented opportunity for you and your species to learn and adapt. It is a privilege. A privilege. Elara looked around the alien space, at the colossal figures, and listened to their patronizing words. There was no choice. She couldn't refuse. She felt like a guinea pig chosen for a grand cosmic experiment. But deep inside, a small flame was kindling. A flame of curiosity, of challenge. Could she prove to these arrogant beings that human intelligence was not primitive at all? After the fateful moment in the antechamber of the Interstellar Council, Elara was guided through a series of glowing corridors, each leading to a space with a distinct architecture and feel. Her journey to Xy'lar Academy wasn't an ordinary flight, it was a trans-spatial experience. An instantaneous shift through dimensions that Earth's science hadn't even dared to dream of. Each shift brought a slight disorientation, as if her body was being reconfigured at a molecular level, before the new landscape unfolded before her eyes. Finally, she was led to a vast, serene, and majestic space. This was Xy'lar Academy. Xy'lar was unlike any school on Earth. It wasn't a single building, but a colossal architectural complex suspended in a boundless void, where distant stars shimmered like diamonds on a black velvet curtain. Soaring crystal towers stretched into infinity, connected by shimmering bridges of light. Domes of unseen metallic materials curved gracefully, reflecting light from a central energy source, creating a spectacle that was both surreal and grand. The air here was strangely pure, carrying a faint scent like ozone and warm metal, enough for Elara to realize she was in a completely alien place. Welcome to Xy'lar Academy. A soft, melodious voice resonated. It was a willow-like being, with fluid limbs and a shimmering, emerald-like bark. I am Overseer Aethel, who will guide you through your first days here. Overseer Aethel explained that Xy'lar was not just a school, it was a philosophy. An elite center where the galaxy's most advanced civilizations shared and developed knowledge of strategy, psychological warfare, and the art of mind control. It was the only place where top-secret knowledge, accumulated over millions of years of war and peace, was imparted. Every student here is an elite representative of their civilization, meticulously chosen from billions of individuals. Overseer Aethel said, her voice betraying unmistakable pride. They are the greatest minds, those who will shape the future of the galaxy. Elara felt a heavy pressure on her shoulders. Could she, a small human from a primitive planet, compete with these greatest minds? Overseer Aethel began introducing the main species within the academy, the civilizations that had contributed to Xy'lar's renown. Zylos. They are masters of logic and calculation. Overseer Aethel explained. Their minds are like a hyper-advanced network, capable of analyzing millions of variables in an instant. For the Zylos, strategy is a perfect sequence of equations, with no room for emotion or spontaneity. Valerius, heir to the Zylos Empire, is one of our most distinguished students. Elara felt a sense of unease hearing that name. Perhaps Valerius was the stony figure she had met on the council. Xy'lar. If the Zylos represent logic, then the Xy'lar are the embodiment of psychology. She continued. They are masters of emotional manipulation, reading body language, and predicting behavior. For them, war is a battle of minds, where the most potent weapon is an understanding of the enemy's fears and desires. Their thinking is fluid and profound, transcending many human ethical boundaries. Elara, with her psychology background, felt a particular curiosity about this species. Vortexian. The Vortexians are masters of adaptation and controlled chaos. Overseer Aethel introduced. They follow no rules, have no fixed strategies. They shift, adapt, and find loopholes in every system. For them, every battle is a dance of surprise and structural disruption. Elara found this intriguing. It sounded similar to her approach to complex games. Student Ry'an of this species is quite notable, despite his seemingly indifferent demeanor. Chronos. And finally, the Chronos, Overseer Aethel said with special reverence. They are the keepers of time and the seers. Their abilities allow them to perceive potential timelines, anticipating the possibilities and consequences of every action. For them, strategy is a symphony played through time, where every note carries significance. Elara felt overwhelmed by the diversity and complexity of these civilizations. Each species seemed to represent a different pinnacle of intelligence. As for you, Elara Vance, Overseer Aethel turned to her, her voice growing colder. You are a special case. An experimental project. You will be provided with necessary environmental adjustments and a special nutritional regimen to ensure the survival of your species in this environment. We have prepared meticulously. Elara felt like a scientific specimen. She was led to a secluded area in the dormitories, where the environment was adjusted to suit human physiology, oxygen levels, gravity, even air composition. This showed their meticulousness, but also highlighted her difference and isolation. Elara's first day at Khater was a cascade of curious glances and whispers in alien languages. Other students, with their peculiar forms and arrogant demeanors, frequently stared at her. She overheard wagers through her internal translator. How long will the human last? 1 cycle? Half a cycle? I bet it'll scream and demand to go back to its planet within a week. No one believed she could complete the program. Elara felt the pervasive disdain. She was a curiosity, a joke, living proof of humanity's primitiveness. But deep within Elara's heart, a stubborn spark remained. They could underestimate her, mock her, but they knew nothing of humanity's tenacity, of her extraordinary ability to adapt and learn. They knew nothing of the secrets she had uncovered in her world of games. She would show them. Elara Vance always gravitated towards the deeper currents of human experience, particularly the intricate world of humanistic psychology and therapy. Her strength lay not in logic or manipulation, but in an extraordinary capacity for empathy and profound emotional connection. She spent her days at university delving into case studies of emotional trauma, dedicating her free time to volunteer work, listening to stories of individuals struggling with loneliness, fear, and despair. Her life revolved around finding connection, offering solace, and helping others navigate their internal landscapes. She believed that true understanding came from the heart, not just the mind. Meanwhile, the Interstellar Council, usually concerned with galactic order and technological advancement, faced an unprecedented crisis. A mysterious, non-physical threat, manifesting as a wave of profound emotional instability, was sweeping across the galaxy. It wasn't a hostile invasion, but a pervasive sense of dread, despair, and an inexplicable compulsion towards self-destruction, slowly eroding the will of entire civilizations. The most advanced species, with their superior logic and sophisticated defense systems, were utterly stumped. Their instruments couldn't detect its source. Their algorithms couldn't predict its patterns. And their tactical responses were useless against an enemy that attacked the mind itself. The Council, in a desperate attempt to find a solution, stumbled upon Earth. They had been monitoring nascent civilizations for signs of unique resilience or unusual psychic phenomena. What they found on Earth was perplexing, despite its rudimentary technology. Humanity showed a remarkable immunity to this emotional plague. And within humanity, one individual, Elara Vance, exhibited an unparalleled ability to not just perceive, but to regulate and even harmonize emotional wavelengths. She was chosen not for her intellect, but for her heart, not for what she knew, but for how she felt. Elara's arrival at Khater was abrupt and disorienting. She expected a school, perhaps a research facility. Instead, she found herself in what felt like a vast, solemn hospital ship, albeit one made of gleaming crystal and silent energy. This was no longer an academy of tactical warfare. It was a centralized research and crisis response hub. A sterile, somber place where scientists and specialists from across the galaxy frantically sought answers to the pervasive emotional threat. Khater now hummed with a low, anxious energy, its magnificent structures overshadowed by an unspoken dread. Welcome, human, a voice, devoid of warmth, greeted her. It was a slender, multi-limbed being from the Zylos species, its optical sensors clicking as it scanned her. You are subject 734 Alpha. Your unique bio-emotional signatures have been noted. We will begin testing immediately. Elara was not a student here, she was a specimen. A living enigma to be dissected. The Khater faculty, composed of the galaxy's foremost minds, viewed her with cold, analytical curiosity. They saw her as a potential key, a biological anomaly, rather than a sentient being. They sought to quantify her empathy, to algorithmically break down her emotional resilience, hoping to replicate it. The Zylos, led by Valerius, a prominent young scientist, focused on mapping Elara's neural pathways, attempting to find a logical framework for her emotional responses. Valerius, brilliant and intensely logical, considered emotions to be nothing more than complex variables that could eventually be quantified and controlled. He saw Elara as a walking dataset, a curious anomaly that simply defied their current understanding. The Xy'lar, under the keen eye of Kalin, a leading experimental psychologist, attempted to replicate Elara's empathy through advanced manipulation techniques. Kalin was a master of emotional engineering, capable of inducing fear, joy, or despair with precise vocalizations and subtle energy fields. But he soon discovered that while he could mimic an emotion, he couldn't generate the genuine, raw compassion Elara possessed. He viewed her ability as a strange, untamed force, perhaps dangerous if not understood and controlled. The Vortexians, with their chaotic adaptability, saw Elara as a fascinating example of emergent, unpredictable behavior. Ry'an, a young biopsychologist with a rebellious streak, was immediately drawn to Elara. Unlike the others, he didn't view her as a subject. He saw the genuine, human warmth in her eyes. He believed that the answer to the crisis lay not in dissecting emotions, but in understanding them, and that the Khater's rigid, logical approach was fundamentally flawed. He often sat in the observation rooms, not to record data, but to simply watch Elara, a flicker of genuine curiosity in his usually detached demeanor. Elara underwent a barrage of tests. She was placed in elaborate simulations designed to expose her to the raw emotional impact of the galactic threat. She felt the crushing despair of a civilization on the brink of collapse, the pervasive anxiety of an entire species consumed by fear, while the Xy'lar scientists meticulously recorded her biometric responses. Elara simply felt it. She felt the echoing screams, the silent tears, the cold, gnawing loneliness of billions. She quickly realized the futility of Khater's methods. They were trying to fight an emotional contagion with logic and technology. They were attempting to quantify the unquantifiable, to manipulate what yearned for connection. Their advanced instruments could map the negative emotional wavelengths, but they couldn't understand their source, nor could they offer solace. They were trying to cure a soul sickness with a scalpel. Yet, it was in these very tests that Elara's unique strength shone through. She didn't just perceive emotions, she had the ability to absorb, process, and even subtly harmonize them. When exposed to overwhelming despair, she wouldn't succumb. Instead, a peculiar calm would settle over her, and her own emotional signature, warm and resonant, would slowly begin to counterbalance the negative influx. She could listen to the voice of pain, the cry of hopelessness, which other species simply categorized as data or anomalies. Valerius observed this with a mixture of scientific fascination and intellectual frustration. He would meticulously record every fluctuation in Elara's brain activity, every subtle shift in her emotional markers. Your emotional resilience is statistically improbable. Subject 734 Alpha. He would state, his voice devoid of inflection. Can you provide a logical explanation for this anomaly? Elara would simply sigh. It's not an anomaly, Valerius. It's empathy. It's understanding. It's feeling what others feel, and letting them know they're not alone. Valerius would simply record her response, categorizing it as subjective data. He viewed her as a precious, living data point, but couldn't grasp the inherent scientific value of emotions as anything more than a variable to be calculated. Kalin, on the other hand, tried to replicate Elara's ability. He used advanced neurostimulators and psychic amplifiers to induce similar emotional states in himself and other Xy'lar subjects. He could generate powerful bursts of manufactured empathy, but it felt hollow, forced. He realized he could manipulate the surface, but he couldn't touch the depth of genuine compassion. He saw Elara's power as a strange, untamed force, perhaps dangerous if not understood and controlled, but also undeniably potent. Ry'an, however, was different. He saw the toll these tests took on Elara, the quiet exhaustion in her eyes from constantly absorbing so much pain. He was the only one who seemed to understand that what she possessed wasn't just a measurable ability, but an inherent quality of her being. He would often bring her nutrient paste that subtly mimicked Earth's comfort food, or simply sit in the observation room after a session, offering a silent, non-judgmental presence. He believed that the solution couldn't be found in laboratories or cold data, it had to come from somewhere else. Elara felt the weight of the galaxy's despair pressing on her, but she also felt the faint spark of humanity within her. She was a solitary light in a vast, cold universe, but she was a light nonetheless. She knew that Kater's approach was failing. She needed to make them understand that to heal the galaxy, they first needed to understand the heart. The emotional plague continued its relentless spread, claiming more star systems and pushing countless civilizations closer to the brink. It wasn't a visible enemy, no fleets of warships or destructive beams. Instead, it manifested as an insidious internal erosion. Planets once vibrant with innovation descended into lethargy, then despair, their populations succumbing to apathy, conflict, or simply a profound loss of the will to exist. Families dissolved, governments fractured, and technological advancements ground to a halt as the very fabric of society unraveled from within. Within the sterile confines of Kater, the grim reality became painfully apparent. Their most sophisticated countermeasures, psychic dampeners, emotional stabilizers, algorithmic analyses of emotional signatures, all failed. Each new simulation, each frantic experimental trial, only confirmed their growing impotence. The initial scientific curiosity that had drawn the galaxy's brightest minds to Kater slowly began to curdle into despair and fear. Even the highly logical Zylos found their calculations becoming muddled, their concentration wavering. The Xy'lar, masters of emotional control, struggled to maintain their own composure as the pervasive negative emotional wavelengths seeped into the Academy's very atmosphere. Elara felt it all, like a human tuning fork. She resonated with the overwhelming despair that now permeated Kater. She witnessed the quiet anguish in the eyes of the Chronos as their predictions of collapse became increasingly accurate. She saw the frustrated anger of the Vortexians as their chaotic methods proved useless. And she felt the chilling, calculating fear that began to grip even the Zylos, normally paragons of detached logic. She could only listen, observe, and feel the immense suffering, a silent conduit for the galaxy's pain. It was a crushing burden, yet she bore it, her innate empathy acting as both a receptor and a strange, subtle filter. They're all just trying to fix the symptoms, aren't they? Ry'an murmured to Elara one cycle, his usually energetic demeanor subdued. He was the only one who didn't look at her as a scientific marvel, but as another sentient being caught in a terrifying crisis. They analyze the data, but they don't feel the source. Elara nodded, her eyes distant. It's like trying to cure a fever by only measuring its temperature. You need to find what's causing the infection. Ry'an's curiosity, born from his Vortexian nature, wasn't about breaking the system, but about understanding its true workings. He began to subtly undermine Kater's strict protocols, using his unconventional methods to gain Elara access to deeper data, to the records of civilizations that had already fallen. He even managed to secure a few, unauthorized, visits for Elara to quarantined observation sectors, where she could directly, albeit briefly, experience the raw emotional resonance of affected beings. He believed that the answer lay not in more data points, but in a profound, unfiltered connection. In these clandestine visits, Elara would place her hand on the transparent containment fields. Closing her eyes, she wouldn't try to analyze. She would simply listen. She felt the echoes of joy that once animated these beings, now twisted into agonizing sorrow. She felt the fierce love that had once bound their societies, now warped into bitter resentment. It was agonizing, but it gave her clarity. The more Elara listened, the more a startling truth began to emerge. It wasn't an attack. It wasn't an invading force or a malicious entity. The pervasive emotional plague, the galactic despair, was in fact a distorted cry for help from an ancient, dying civilization. This civilization wasn't physically present in their dimension, it was either trapped, long extinct but leaving an emotional imprint, or somehow existing in a fractured state across multiple realities. Their threat was a massive, uncontrolled psychic projection of their own immense fear, despair, and profound loneliness. It was a scream echoing through the cosmos, so powerful and raw that it inadvertently shattered the emotional equilibrium of any species it touched. Elara articulated her theory to Ry'an, who, surprisingly, accepted it without much hesitation. A cry for help, not an attack? That's revolutionary, Vance, he mused, but it fits. Their logic here wouldn't even conceive of such a thing. Their radical hypothesis, however, immediately sparked a fierce conflict with Kalen, the Xy'lar psychologist, who had been tirelessly trying to find a way to manipulate this emotional wave. Scoffed at Elara's sentimental interpretation. A cry for help. Kalen's voice dripped with disdain, his intricate Xy'lar facial markings flaring with agitation. That's an unscientific, baseless emotional fantasy. This is a chaotic energy signature, a destructive force. We must find a way to harness or suppress it, not empathize with it. Elara met his gaze, her voice calm but firm. You see it as a tool, Kalen, a wave to be controlled. But it's not a tool. It's the echo of a soul in agony. You can't fight despair with manipulation. You fight it with understanding. Their disagreements escalated into passionate debates, not just about the threat, but about the very nature of emotion itself. Was it a weapon to be wielded, a variable to be controlled, or the very essence of being? Kalen argued that Elara's empathy was a weakness, a susceptibility to the very thing they were fighting. Elara countered that it was precisely their detachment that blinded them to the solution. Despite Kalen's resistance, Elara needed data. Specifically, she needed Valerius. She approached the Zylos scientist, whose frustration with the ongoing failures was visibly mounting. Valerius, Elara began, carefully choosing her words. Your methods of analyzing attack patterns are failing because this isn't an attack. But your ability to process vast amounts of nonlinear data, that could be crucial. I need you to analyze the emotional signatures of this entity not for aggression, but for patterns of distress. Look for the origin of the signal, not its trajectory. Valerius's expression remained impassive, but a flicker of scientific curiosity appeared in his otherwise logical eyes. He was a Zylos, and his purpose was to solve problems. Her theory was illogical, but their current methods were failing. Your hypothesis lacks empirical support, Vance, he stated. However, the current probability of success with existing methodologies approaches zero. Your proposed analysis, though unorthodox, presents a non-zero probability. I will allocate processing power. It was a reluctant, purely scientific cooperation, but it was a start. Valerius, driven by his inherent need for solutions, began to direct Zylos supercomputers to sift through the chaotic emotional data. Not for combat patterns, but for a faint, underlying signature of a desperate plea. As Elara and Ry'an, now with Valerius's formidable analytical power, delved deeper, they uncovered something astonishing. Valerius's calculations, initially designed to track distress signals, began to converge on a forgotten corner of galactic history. Old Chronos records, long dismissed as mythical prophecies or poetic lamentations, spoke of a great emotional sundering, a catastrophic event millennia ago that had trapped an entire pre-hyperspace civilization in a shattered dimension. Their psychic echoes destined to haunt the cosmos. The ancient Chronos texts, translated by Ry'an's knack for uncovering obscured information, described a species that communicated primarily through empathic resonance. Their entire society built on shared emotional experiences. When a cataclysm separated them from their home dimension, their collective despair had amplified into the destructive plague, now engulfing the galaxy. The Chronos, in their foresight, had tried to warn future generations, but their warnings were dismissed as too unscientific by the emerging logical and technologically driven galactic powers. News of Elara's radical theory, now backed by Valerius's cold, hard data, even if he still struggled with the emotional implications. Finally reached the Interstellar Council. Yet, their response was far from accepting. Still blinded by their fear and their rigid definitions of threat, the council members grappled with desperate, yet familiar, solutions. If it is indeed a shattered civilization, Lord Zylos Maximus declared, his voice echoing in the council chambers, then we must contain it. We propose a full planetary quarantine for all affected systems, and a temporal displacement field around the source signal. If containment fails, a calculated energy purge may be necessary to prevent further degradation. Lord Kalin, the Xy'lar council member, despite his earlier disdain for Elara's methods, found himself in a difficult position. He still distrusted her human approach, yet he knew the council's solutions were failing. He remained silent, a conflict brewing within him. Elara, now given a direct audience, stood before the council, pleading, "You cannot contain or purge," a cry for help. This isn't a physical threat. It's profound, overwhelming emotional trauma. To destroy the affected systems would be to destroy the innocent, and to attempt to destroy the source would only amplify its despair, turning it into true rage. Valerius, standing beside her, added his logical support, albeit with difficulty. Analysis indicates that aggressive countermeasures would likely trigger a feedback loop, exacerbating the emotional distortion. The most efficient solution, from a purely logical standpoint of energy conservation, is to address the source rather than the symptoms. His words, framed in Zylos' logic, carried weight, though his internal struggle with the emotional nature of the problem was evident. The council remained torn. Their history was filled with cautionary tales of misjudging nascent species and resorting to brute force. The Valari catastrophe, a tragic incident centuries ago where a seemingly peaceful species, misunderstood and isolated, had become volatile and aggressive, still haunted them. They feared Elara Vance was proposing another sentimental, potentially dangerous path. Your empathy is a weakness, Vance, Lord Zylos Maximus retorted, pointing a digit at her. It makes you vulnerable. It clouds your judgment. We operate on facts, on probabilities, on established protocols. Elara met his gaze, unwavering. My empathy is my strength. Lord Maximus, it's the only thing that allows me to hear what your logic cannot. This is not about protocols. This is about healing. The tension in the council chambers was palpable. The galaxy hung in the balance, teetering between a solution born of fear and a path paved by empathy. Elara knew that the ultimate test was yet to come. She had to prove that the soft, often dismissed, power of the human heart was the only force strong enough to save the galaxy from a threat that transcended all logic and technology. The emotional plague, long simmering beneath the surface, finally reached its crescendo. A colossal wave of negative emotional energy surged through the galaxy, impacting not just distant star systems but now penetrating the very core of Xy'lar Academy itself. The pristine crystal halls, once filled with the hum of scientific inquiry, now echoed with the silent, insidious spread of overwhelming despair, confusion, and fear. Panic began to ripple through the academy. Even the most stoic Zylos scientists found their calculations dissolving into meaningless sequences, their hyper-logical minds unable to process the irrational dread seeping into their very being. The Xy'lar, masters of emotional manipulation, found their own composure cracking under the weight of an emotion they couldn't control, only feel. Students huddled together, their diverse forms trembling, their advanced minds overwhelmed by an unseen enemy that attacked their innermost selves. Systems failed, not due to mechanical error, but because the very will to operate them evaporated. Xy'lar, the bastion of galactic intelligence, was on the verge of collapsing from within, consumed by the very darkness it had sought to understand and contain. Elara felt it all, a maelstrom of agony echoing within her. The academy became a symphony of pain, each being radiating its own unique flavor of terror and hopelessness. It was a crushing, overwhelming burden, threatening to pull her under. Yet, amidst the chaos, a strange, profound calm settled over her. While others succumbed to the emotional onslaught, Elara, the human conduit, remained remarkably steady. Her unique ability to process and harmonize emotions, once seen as a peculiar anomaly, now proved to be her ultimate defense. She was the eye of the storm, anchoring herself in the torrent of galactic sorrow. "They're drowning." Vance. Ry'an gasped, his usually vibrant fur dulled by the pervasive gloom. Even his chaotic energy was muted. "All their logic, all their manipulation, it's useless." Elara nodded, her eyes closed, listening to the cacophony of suffering. "It is," she whispered, her voice surprisingly clear amidst the emotional static. "Because they're trying to fight a wound with a weapon. And you can't fight a wound. You have to heal it." With the galaxy teetering on the brink, and Kater itself succumbing, Elara knew there was only one path left. It wasn't a tactical maneuver, a logical equation, or a psychological trick. It was a leap of faith into the heart of the storm. "We have to go to the source," Elara declared, opening her eyes, a resolute fire now burning in their depths. Not to fight it, but to listen to it. Ry'an, despite his own emotional exhaustion, immediately understood. His Vortexian intuition, unburdened by rigid protocols, resonated with Elara's unconventional approach. He quickly accessed Kater's deepest navigational arrays, the very ones Valerius had used to pinpoint the signal's origin. "It's not a physical location, Elara," Valerius stated, his voice strained but still clinging to logic. As he confirmed the coordinates, even he, the epitome of Zylos' rationality, felt a profound disquiet, a terrifying sense of the illogical unfolding around him. "My projections indicate it's an unstable, extra-dimensional nexus. Attempting physical interaction is statistically unsound." "It's not a physical interaction we need," Elara countered, her voice resonating with an inner conviction. "It's a spiritual one, a connection." With Ry'an's quick thinking to bypass security protocols, Elara entered a specialized Chronos temporal displacement chamber, modified by Ry'an to allow a unique form of psychic projection. Valerius, against all his logical instincts, maintained the chamber's energy matrix, his analytical mind now racing to process the sheer audacity of Elara's plan. As the chamber hummed, Elara closed her eyes, focusing her entire being. She didn't arm herself with knowledge or strategy. She armed herself with pure, unadulterated empathy. She projected her consciousness, her very soul, into the emotional nexus, a swirling void of cosmic despair. What she encountered was not an attacking entity, but a vast, sprawling entity of collective agony. It was the remnants of that ancient empathic civilization, eternally trapped in a fractured dimension. Their combined grief, loneliness, and terror amplified into the destructive waves that had ravaged the galaxy. It was a scream that had been echoing for millennia, unheard, misunderstood, and only causing destruction. Elara didn't try to intellectualize it. She didn't try to analyze its structure or find its weak points. She did the most human thing imaginable. She listened. She immersed herself in their ancient sorrow, absorbed their millennia of unreleased pain. She felt their lost dreams, their shattered connections, their profound, unending solitude. It was agony beyond anything she had ever experienced, a tsunami of despair threatening to consume her utterly. But Elara didn't break. Instead, she did something no Zylos could calculate, no Xy'lar could manipulate, no Vortexian could adapt to. She responded with unconditional compassion. She didn't just feel their pain, she acknowledged it. She sent back a signal of profound understanding, a wave of pure, unwavering solace, a promise that they were no longer alone, that their cries had finally been heard. She projected images of connection, of warmth, of peace, drawing upon the deepest reserves of human kindness. It was an act of raw, unconditional love, a balm for a wound as old as the stars. The effect was instantaneous and profound. The chaotic, destructive emotional waves emanating from the nexus began to ripple and soften. The piercing screams transformed into a fading, melancholic sigh. The destructive despair began to dissolve, not through force, but through acceptance and healing. The emotional plague receded, not because it was defeated, but because it was finally, truly heard and understood. Back in the Kater chamber, the oppressive atmosphere began to lift. The air lightened. The anxious hum of the academy slowly subsided. A profound silence fell over the faculty and students, broken only by the soft, steady hum of the Chronos chamber. Elara emerged, drained but radiant, She looked at the bewildered faces around her. It wasn't an attack, she whispered, her voice hoarse from the effort. It was a cry for help. And I answered it. Kalen, the Xy'lar psychologist, stared at her, his usual arrogance replaced by utter bewilderment. You pacified it with sympathy? That's not possible. Valerius, his logical mind reeling, checked his instruments. The emotional wave signatures were gone. The chaotic data streams had vanished. The system is stable, he stammered, his voice filled with a mixture of disbelief and dawning realization. The threat has ceased. Without force, without logical intervention. The profound peace that now permeated Kater was undeniable. Elara had not fought, she had healed. She had not conquered, she had connected. And in doing so, she had revealed a power that transcended all their understanding. The profound calm that settled over Kater Academy, and indeed, the entire affected quadrant of the galaxy, was unlike anything anyone had ever experienced. The absence of the pervasive emotional plague left a void, a silent testament to its recent, terrifying presence. The subsequent investigation by the Interstellar Council was swift and thorough, driven not by suspicion, but by an urgent need to understand the miracle that had just unfolded. In the council chambers, the atmosphere had shifted dramatically. Lord Zylos Maximus, once the staunch advocate of logical supremacy, now sat with a contemplative expression, his usual rigid posture softened by a newfound humility. Lord Kalen, the Xy'lar representative who had once dismissed Elara's empathy as weakness, now listened intently, his intricate facial markings betraying a rare sense of awe. Professor Lysandra, who had closely observed Elara's journey, presented the comprehensive report. It detailed Elara's unique ability to not just perceive, but to harmonize and absorb massive emotional wavelengths. It explained how her human empathy had allowed her to discern the true nature of the threat, not as an attack, but as a desperate, amplified cry for help from a trapped ancient civilization. And most critically, it detailed how Elara had, by simply listening and responding with unconditional compassion, healed a wound that all their advanced technology and strategic brilliance could not even comprehend. We have always defined strength by calculation, by manipulation, by technological superiority, Professor Lysandra stated, her voice resonating with newfound conviction. We believed in control, in logic, in predictable outcomes. Yet, the greatest threat our galaxy has faced was not overcome by any of these. It was overcome by empathy. A collective murmur rippled through the council. The concept was revolutionary. For millennia, their societies had prioritized intellectual and technological advancement, often viewing emotions as variables to be managed, or at worst, liabilities. They had built their civilizations on the bedrock of cold logic and precise strategy, believing that the path to order and peace lay in the suppression of unpredictable emotional forces. Elara Vance had just shattered that bedrock. Valerius, the Zylos scientist, now stood before the council. His presence alone was a testament to the profound shift occurring, the epitome of Zylos logic. He now spoke with a measured, yet deeply reflective tone. My initial analyses categorized Subject 734 Alpha's emotional responses as statistically illogical anomalies. I sought to quantify and replicate them through pure reason. I was incorrect. He paused, a flicker of something akin to awe in his eyes. The human capacity for empathy, for genuine, selfless connection, operates on a principle that transcends our current understanding of logic. It is a force of immense power, capable of resolving conflicts and healing traumas that our most advanced algorithms cannot even detect, let alone address. His words, coming from a Zylos, carried immense weight. The council began to truly internalize the revelation. They realized that their millennia-long pursuit of perfection had created a dangerous blind spot. They had become so focused on what could be measured, calculated, and controlled, that they had overlooked the most potent force of all, the immeasurable power of the heart. The final report issued by the Interstellar Council was not just a scientific document, it was a profound philosophical re-evaluation. Broadcast across the galaxy, it explicitly overturned centuries of established beliefs and prejudices. It formally declared, empathy is not a weakness, but a supreme strength. The capacity for profound emotional connection, for understanding and healing, is a vital form of intelligence. essential for true galactic harmony and resilience. Technological advancement without emotional understanding is incomplete, and ultimately, vulnerable. Humanity, once deemed primitive and a mere experimental project, was now officially recognized as a species possessing a unique and indispensable form of intelligence. The Great Emotional Plague had, ironically, become the catalyst for the galaxy's own profound emotional awakening. With the galactic emotional crisis averted and the Interstellar Council's historic declaration, Elara Vance's role transcended that of a mere student. She became an icon, a living testament to humanity's unique contribution to the cosmic tapestry. Elara was appointed as a senior advisor to the Interstellar Council on interspecies empathic relations and emotional diplomacy. Her work involved designing new protocols for first contact, ensuring that future encounters with nascent civilizations prioritized emotional understanding and cultural integration over mere technological assessment. She traveled to distant star systems, her presence alone often calming fears and fostering dialogue between disparate species. Xy'lar Academy, the very institution that once treated her as a subject, underwent a sweeping transformation. Its core curriculum was fundamentally reshaped. New departments emerged, focusing on interspecies emotional psychology, empathic resonance studies, and conflict resolution through mutual understanding. Gone were the cold, sterile simulations focused solely on logic and tactical superiority. Instead, students were now challenged to explore the nuances of alien emotions, to practice active listening, and to develop their own innate capacities for empathy. Some of the most advanced Chronos predictive models were recalibrated to map not just logical outcomes, but also emotional ripple effects across timelines. Elara's relationship with Ry'an blossomed into a deep, unwavering friendship. His rebellious Vortexian spirit, always seeking to understand the unconventional, found its perfect complement in Elara's profound empathy. They collaborated on numerous projects, with Ry'an devising innovative methods to bridge communication gaps and Elara ensuring that the emotional nuances of every interaction were preserved and respected. He often referred to her as the galaxy's healer, a title she found both humbling and profoundly accurate. Valerius, the once unyielding Zylos scientist, became one of Elara's most dedicated collaborators. The experience of the emotional plague had shattered his rigid worldview, but in its place grew a profound appreciation for dimensions of knowledge he had once dismissed. He utilized his unparalleled logical and analytical skills to develop quantifiable frameworks for emotional well-being, to create algorithms that could identify potential emotional distress signals in other civilizations, allowing for preventative intervention. He learned from Elara that true perfection lay not in the absence of flaws, but in the capacity for growth and understanding, even of the irrational. You taught me that the universe isn't just a series of equations, Elara, Valerius once confessed, a rare, almost imperceptible softening in his voice. It's a symphony of feelings, and true logic includes the logic of the heart. Even Kalen, the Xy'lar psychologist, found himself on a new path. He began to apply his vast knowledge of emotional manipulation not for control, but for healing. He developed therapeutic techniques to help individuals and populations recover from emotional trauma, leveraging the Xy'lar's innate understanding of emotional dynamics to foster resilience and promote well-being. He learned that true mastery of emotion lay in nurturing, not in coercing. Under Elara's pervasive influence, the relationships between the diverse species within Xy'lar, and indeed across the galaxy, underwent a profound transformation. The old rivalries and ingrained prejudices began to dissolve, replaced by a deep respect for each civilization's unique strengths. They understood that the galaxy's true power lay in its diversity, in the mosaic of its varied intelligences, be they logical, intuitive, adaptive, or empathic. For Earth, Elara's legacy was immeasurable. Humanity was no longer an isolated, primitive species. It was a respected member of the galactic community, recognized not for its technology, but for its profound capacity for empathy and connection. Xy'lar established new exchange programs, bringing alien scholars to Earth to study human culture, art, philosophy, and our unique approach to emotional intelligence. Conversely, Earth scientists and psychologists were welcomed into the most advanced research institutes of the galaxy, contributing their insights to a newly holistic understanding of the cosmos. Humanity's journey from a small, blue planet to a vital bridge between worlds had truly begun. Years turned into decades. Elara Vance, no longer just a student, was a respected elder stateswoman of the galaxy, a beacon of wisdom and compassion. Her life's work was dedicated to fostering interspecies understanding, promoting emotional literacy across civilizations, and ensuring that no cry for help would ever go unheard again. One evening, Elara stood on a serene observation platform on the outer rim of Khater, gazing out at the endless expanse of the cosmos. The stars, once distant and intimidating, now seemed like countless eyes, each twinkling with the potential of unique civilizations, each carrying its own secrets and emotional landscapes. Beside her, Ry'an stood, his Vortexian eyes reflecting the distant starlight, a familiar, playful glint in their depths. "You know, Vance," Ry'an said, his voice softer than usual, a genuine warmth radiating from him. "You didn't just change an academy. You changed the very heart of the galaxy." Elara smiled, her gaze still fixed on the stars. "We only showed them what was always there. Ry'an, intelligence isn't just about what you know. It's about how deeply you can feel. It's about the connections you make." Valerius, now a revered figure in galactic diplomacy and empathic analytics, joined them. The stiffness that once defined him had melted away, replaced by a quiet wisdom and a profound sense of peace. "You taught me that true perfection isn't the absence of flaws, but the embrace of all aspects of being, including the emotional," he stated, his voice resonating with deep conviction. "And sometimes, the most profound solutions come from the most unexpected and most human places." Elara looked out at the universe, feeling its vastness and complexity. She remembered the young woman from Earth, poring over psychology textbooks, helping individuals navigate their emotional turmoil. She had come so far, beyond her wildest dreams. She knew her journey was far from over. The galaxy still held countless mysteries, countless challenges, and countless hearts waiting to be understood. But now, she wasn't alone. She had friends, colleagues, from every corner of the cosmos, all united by a newfound appreciation for the power of empathy, for the profound strength of connection. Humanity's unique blend of emotional intelligence, compassion, and the innate ability to truly listen, had proven to be the galaxy's greatest asset. Elara Vance, the seemingly ordinary student from Earth, had become the living symbol of humanity's boundless potential, a beacon of light that illuminated the path towards a new era of harmony and profound understanding throughout the universe.